Greetings, comrades. The South African Minister of Labour and Employment in the last few days released the draft National Labour Migration. He paid more attention into what he calls labour distortions. That is to say, employers paying low wages to migrants. Let's use Zimbabwean civil servants as an example to understand this distortion so that we are able to formulate a proper understanding and a position. You will know that in the last decade, Zimbabwean workers have not been paid sufficiently. For instance, before the introduction of the multi-currency regime in 2009, workers in Zimbabwe were paid low wages where the inflation had gone high. But after the introduction of the multi-currency regime, up to 2017, 2017, civil servants were paid $540, which is 8,100 rands. Of course, might not be enough, but it was far much better compared to what they are being paid under what is called the Second Republic, that is under the Emmerson Mnangagwa administration. Today, civil servants have been paid $105, which is 1,575 rands. This then was reviewed by the Zimbabwean government last month following protest by workers mainly in the teaching profession when schools failed to open. So government had to increase the salaries and included what they call the COVID allowance. So they are being paid $280, which is 4,200. So that's the money that they will be paid end of this month in March 2022. If you compare their salaries from the 4,200 rands, it is the money that people who are working in the low skill in South Africa, this is what they are being paid. So you can compare a professional who works as a civil servant in Zimbabwe and a person working as a domestic worker in South Africa. They will be earning almost the same salary. But you also know that the cost of living in Zimbabwe is high. Zimbabwe is a supermarket of South Africa. Most of the goods that you consume in Zimbabwe are manufactured in South Africa. We buy our products in South Africa. So even the 4,200 might not be sufficient to a teacher in Zimbabwe when one takes into account the cost of living. Of course, because Zimbabwean teachers in the main have been paid $105. Some have accepted to be recruited to work in Rwanda, where the Rwandan government is paying them $200 a month. We are told that the cost of living in Rwanda is very, very low compared to South Africa and Zimbabwe. So if an educator or a civil servant in Zimbabwe gets paid 4,200 rands and they can be paid, say, 6,000 to 7,000 rands in South Africa, they will certainly accept the money. That's the reality that we have to deal with. So while South Africa is developing its national labor migration policy, it's important to also factor in what is happening in neighboring countries, because the South African economy is linked to the region. So without resolving the economic and political crisis in the neighboring countries, particularly in Zimbabwe, we'll continue to have more people flocking into South Africa. And when they arrive, they are being exploited by employers. Of course, the minister spoke about what the Department of Home Affairs is doing in respect to border management. Is something that at some point we will have to discuss the challenges in implementing that. But the reality of the matter is that workers in neighboring countries, particularly in Zimbabwe, professionals for that matter, are attracted to South Africa to work in low-paying jobs in the South African context because they are paid less or similar to what is being paid in Zimbabwe. Because if a civil servant comes to South Africa, gets a job as a domestic worker, they are given accommodation. So that means they've subtracted the rent from their salary, they've subtracted transport from their salary. So they will think that it is better to work as a domestic worker than to work as a teacher in Zimbabwe, which then means you now have professionals competing with the non-professionals in South Africa in working in low-paid jobs. What this means is something that we have to discuss as we continue engaging on this subject. But let's also look at the contribution by the migrants in South Africa or to the South African economy, because part of the review of the National Labour Migration Draft and also the permit regime as announced by President Ramaphosa in the SONA is that any migrant that comes to South Africa must contribute to the economy of South Africa. South Africa should attract migrants who have skills that will contribute to the South African economy. But it is also true that low-paid workers in South Africa of migrant origin have contributed immensely into the economy of South Africa. One has to be at Beitbridge Border Post every morning. You'll see queues of people coming into South Africa to buy goods. That is cross-border traders to buy goods into South Africa for resale in Zimbabwe. As I've said, that Zimbabwe is a supermarket of South Africa. If you are at the border again in the evening, you will see queues of people going back with lots of groceries or goods that they are taking for resale in Zimbabwe. The reason being that over 80% of the workforce in Zimbabwe is in the informal sector, and they buy their products made in South Africa, Botswana, and other countries within the region. But those that are working in South Africa, and I'm talking to those that are legal in South Africa. I'm not talking about those that are not documented in South Africa. I'm talking about those that have been under special permits, which Cabinet has decided not to renew. If you look into their contribution to the South African economy over the last decade, it is huge, because they purchase goods in South Africa. It contributes to the South African economy. These goods are manufactured in South Africa. While we understand, and there's a clear understanding, that there's a perception which the minister spoke about, that migrants are taking South African jobs. But we must also, on the other side, look into the contribution to the economy of those that have been part of the economy who are legal in the country, even under special permits. Because there's a perception also, which we need to deal with. Because people think that when these migrants, particularly from Zimbabwe, who are documented to work in South Africa, they simply take out the money from the South African economy. That is not true. They contribute in terms of the rentals that they pay in the high buildings that they live in. The landlords are catching millions which are paid in rentals by Zimbabweans and other migrants that are legal in the country. They buy goods which are sent to Zimbabwe to support their families. And this, of course, contributes to the South African economy. So it's a discussion that we should also have, because this discussion, in our view, should not only be narrowed to people taking jobs, but we must then begin to say those that are in the country legally, wherever they work, but they are documented. And of course, the South African government had said it's not going to renew the special permits, but people should move to other visas. But it is important to do a study, which we have not done, in terms of the contribution they have made over the last decade to the South African economy. Yes, a majority of them were abused when they were not documented. So the documentation project in 2010 was a step in addressing the abuse by the employers. Those that are under special permits were able, in the 10 years that were under these special permits, to take their employers to CCMA and to refuse to be exploited because they understood their rights. And the many that are exploited are those that are outside the Zimbabwe documentation project, as it was said or named in 2010. So we need, as we discuss this, to say what has been the contribution of those that are documented in South Africa. Of course, there's need to discuss the issue of migrants that are not documented. But we thought it is important that from our point of view, we also speak to, as we discuss the national labor migration, to say what has been the contribution to the South African economy by holders of the Zimbabwe exemption permits. But of course, as I've said, as I move into conclusion, that in order to deal with these challenges, there is need to address the political and the economic challenges in neighboring countries, but particularly in Zimbabwe. Because as long as the Zimbabwe economy is collapsing, it has a huge impact to the South African economy. And these challenges that the minister and his colleagues seek to address will be difficult to deal with. For instance, in the past weekend, we saw again political violence in rallies organized by the opposition. The state, through the police and the ZANU-PF supporters, are accused of disrupting these rallies. This, if it is not addressed, is going to play itself out until the 2023 elections. And we know in the past that if this continues, and you create a political environment that is not conducive for political campaigns, it affects the Zimbabwean economy itself. It then drives young people to neighboring countries. Many then find themselves in South Africa. Of course, one would think that maybe SADC should act, but our experience is that SADC is a toothless dog, will not act. So, as part of this discussion, it's important to point out these things. We've made our own contribution that one of the things that Zimbabwe needs to do in terms of assisting South Africa and the region, because this migration crisis has its roots in a collapsed economy in Zimbabwe, in unstable political environment in Zimbabwe, which must be attended to. One of the issues that we have raised, which of course the Zimbabwean government is not keen to address, is the world currency question. Because we are saying that in the immediate, Zimbabwe must adopt a rand as its official currency, so that we are able to stabilize the economy. You can imagine if a person working in Bulawayo is earning more or less what a worker in South Africa earns, and we then begin to focus on production, it will indeed reduce the migration from Zimbabwe in the main to South Africa. In one of our theoretical journals, We have an article that Collins Ndlovu is an economist. He wrote, he is not a communist, of course, but he contributed to a theoretical journal. This is what he said, I quote, "Secondly, if Zimbabwe could use the South African rand for all its pricing purposes and as a transitional currency, this is a straightforward thing to do and can be done tomorrow morning. The rand is already a legal tender currency in Zimbabwe, so there's no further consultation with anyone that is required. It is a matter of the Zimbabwean markets, led by the government, just pricing all their goods and services in rands with immediate effect. This can be done within the multi-currency framework, where US dollar pricing simply gets replaced by rand pricing. Given the fact that South African banks are dominant in Zimbabwe, the provision of rands and the synchronization of rand transactions will be seamless. The Zimbabwean diaspora in South Africa will also ensure a reliable, steady supply of rands. Cross-border traders also will not suffer currency distortions. Already, the SADC-wide series system that is owned by all SADC central banks facilitates rand transactions across the SADC region. Through the series system, a rand transaction in Johannesburg is the same as a rand transaction in Harare or Lusaka. It does not need to go via New York or Mongolia or London like before the adoption of the series system, close quote. So it's important that in the immediate, Zimbabwe adopts the rand. This, in our view, will at least assist in ensuring that you have no more people coming into South Africa. Because if the economy continues to collapse in Zimbabwe, these issues that the Minister of Labor and Employment wants to address will remain. As I conclude, the contributions also by the migrants working in South Africa, particularly those that are on special permits, goes up to the motor industry. The goods that are transported, the migrants buy or omalayage South African vehicles that transport these goods. This is a contribution to the South African economy. If you stand along N1 or in Polokwane every weekend, you'll see all these vehicles omalayage are going to Limpopo carrying goods. We don't have to talk about the fuel that these vehicles are using and the trucks that transport these goods that are bought by migrants working in South Africa. We want to hear your views as we continue to engage. Like we're saying that we understand the perception as expressed by the minister that migrants are taking people's jobs. But we must also discuss the contribution of migrants who are legal in the country to the South African economy. Please write your comments, share your views, share this video. Please subscribe. Thank you so much, comrades. Amal.